How did the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization founded to promote free speech and civil liberties and to protect free speech and civil liberties, how did an organization like that become a deadly enemy of free speech and of civil liberties? The New York Times recently, in a pretty good article by Michael Powell, the Times these days is erratic. Most of its articles are just garbage. But this is an article, the kind the Times will occasionally publish, that is an examination. They caught up with a guy named David Goldberger. And David Goldberger, who is now in his 70s, almost 80, he was the one who argued on behalf of the ACLU to let the Nazis march in Skokie. For those of you who don't know, Skokie, a heavily Jewish neighborhood in Illinois. The Nazis wanted to march there. The Jews obviously protested. They said this will be very traumatic. We've got Holocaust survivors who live here. But the ACLU was, you may say, absolutist in its view of free speech, that people have a right to speak. And as long as the speech is legal, government cannot restrict it. They can't shut it down. And David Goldberg, who argued that case, tells the New York Times the ACLU is different now. He's disappointed in the organization. He says, quote, "Liberals are leaving the First Amendment behind." Now, David Goldberg is not alone. Ira Glasser, the former head of the ACLU, says that, look, the ACLU is now trying to be some kind of left-wing group that promotes racial justice and immigrant rights and transgender issues. And he goes, but there's only one ACLU that used to be a content-neutral defender of free speech. He goes, I fear we're in danger of losing that. Now, this is all understatement. What he means is, I fear it's gone. We can't count on the ACLU anymore. Nadine Strawson, New York University Law School professor, former head of the ACLU. Nadine Strawson is a consistent defender of free speech. She knows, and she said publicly, that the ACLU has abandoned its core cause. Now, there have been free speech battles. We're living in a time where free speech is gravely endangered in this country. In fact, quite frankly, you and I don't have it. Not only are we censored regularly by digital platforms, restricted in all kinds of places, but we end up censoring ourselves in order not to be kicked off these platforms, which are now the public square of American political discourse. And it isn't just digital platforms. The free speech debate involves public schools where you can't say what you believe, in campuses where you are hauled up on charges, or you violate a speech code, or you're brought in by the dean, or there's a demonstration to have you expelled because you said something that ran athwart of contemporary orthodoxies. Corporate America just become just as regimented in stifling free speech. And then government institutions. And so this is a problem across the board. There's almost no American who's safe here. And at one time, if you were expelled from your job, or you were censored by the government, or you were shut down, you could go to the ACLU. And the ACLU would say, hey, listen, we may detest your politics. You may be some kind of an extremist or a right-winger or this or that, but we have a principled commitment to free speech. And this is the point about these rights, is that either you defend them on principle or you don't believe in them at all. It was Anthony Lewis, the New York Times writer, many years ago, in writing about, in a somewhat different context, when he's talking about civil liberties, he says that our civil liberties are often protected in cases that involve some not so nice people who are criminals, who nevertheless have a right to criminal representation, in other words, to a due process of law defense, people who say ugly things, but nevertheless, their rights need to be protected. Why? Because by protecting free speech at its extreme, you make speech safer, more protected for the rest of us. But you can't count on the ACLU to do that. Part of the reason appears to be this guy, Anthony Romero, who is the first, quote, person of color, and apparently a race justice activist. He's, by the way, also gay, and so he's become a fanatic transgender guy. And so there's a new mood at the ACLU. They're happy to repress speech, to take the side of the bad guys. Recently, a transgender ACLU lawyer startled even some traditional ACLU supporters who remember the ACLU's fights against book banning and censorship. He's talking about a book on transgender rights, which he doesn't approve of. And this transgender lawyer says, stopping the circulation of this book and these ideas is 100% a hill I will die on. Wow. This is a person saying not only that they want to repress the book, but they're willing to go to the mat for it. They're willing to sort of put their life on the line for it. The ACLU has raised a lot of money in being a kind of anti-Trump organization. And so it appears like they've drifted from being a free speech organization and a civil liberties organization. I mean, they don't protect, it's not just free speech. When there was the Trump administration wanted to give greater protections for people accused of sexual harassment on campus, greater protections to the accused. Now, this is a cause that the ACLU used to be on top of, protecting the accused because they might be falsely accused. But no, the ACLU basically attacks the Trump administration, says don't protect the accusers. This promotes an unfair process, inappropriately favoring the accused. And then in the Ma'Khia Bryant case, where you remember the cop who had to make a split-second decision facing a black girl with a knife in the process of stabbing another black girl, the ACLU tweets, Columbus police murdered a 15-year-old black girl. Think about it. There's been no trial, there's been no conviction, no evidence, and yet here's the ACLU in a criminal justice case where at one time they would have been very solicitous of the rights of the accused, but now the guilty, presumed guilty, guilty until proven innocent. So this is the new ACLU. It's a national disgrace. Far from being an organization that we can respect and support, it is an organization that deserves our condign and appropriate contempt.